This story is an excerpt from my unpublished novel, Memoir of a Lotus Eater. Let me know in the comments if you would like to hear more stories like this. At this point in the story, Dale and I hired a guide to take us to a remote village in the Golden Triangle to find a Karen shaman. We were each carrying a half ounce of ganja, which would get you minimum a 10-year prison sentence in Thailand and possibly a death sentence. This tactic literally saved our lives. Our journey began in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where we had hired Utai, a renegade guide, to take us off the beaten tracks in search of a hill tribe medicine man. Utai was a former smuggler who had ridden with the mule trains that meandered through the hill country, carrying rubies and sapphires from the Shan states of Myanmar to Thailand. He assured us that we would be safe with him, since he was friends with all the mountain bandits. Utai was one of the many hustlers and touts that would hang out in front of the cheaper hotel lobbies and solicit business from guests as they entered or left the hotel. Mostly they were a nuisance, unless there was something you need and didn't know how to get. We boarded the back of a 4x4, a Nissan pickup truck that was outfitted with 2 benches running lengthwise. It was covered over by an aluminum canopy and roof racks on which luggage was stored. 4 people could sit along each of the 2 benches. Our bags were stowed on the roof, and we joined several village women who were loaded down with bags of groceries in the back of the pickup. Dale and I sat opposite each other, self-conscious of the space our bodies occupied. Compared to the child-sized women sharing the bench, we felt like giants. No one spoke as we set off along a jungle logging road. I pretended not to notice the curious, frightened glances of the small brown-skinned women. They seemed especially curious about the black leather jacket that Dale was wearing. Sensing an opportunity for cultural exchange, Dale held out a leather-clad arm, slapped his forearm, and said, "Leather." The women recoiled in mutual shock of the broken silence. Dale was undaunted. He offered a corner of the jacket to the nearest woman and thumbed the leather. "Feel, don't be afraid," Utai translated. The women relaxed. Giggling, one of the women felt the jacket. Next in line of interest was Dale's curious mop of curly hair being unknown among the hill tribes. All the women took turns feeling Dale's hair and giggling. Then the facial hair. Dale had twisted one corner of his mustache and sneered in the fashion of a comic villain, to the squeals of delight. The logging road consisted of 2 ruts. Vehicles traveling in opposite directions would have to stop and pull around to let each other pass. After another hour, we met another 4x4 coming along the road, and as we passed, the driver stopped and exchanged words. Our driver yelled something back to the passengers, and we continued along the road. There was a change of mood among the passengers. Utai was silent and looked frightened. "What was that about?" I asked. Utai explained that the other driver had warned them of a police checkpoint up ahead on the road. "What police? What are they looking for?" I thought it might be the Thai army soldiers searching for the bandits the area is said to be infested by. No such luck. Utai explained that the Thai Border Patrol, a special military police force, would set up surprise spot checks along the jungle roads in hopes of intercepting drug couriers. I looked at Dale. "Where's yours?" Dale tapped his left boot. It was in his left boot. Dale's calf-high black leather Confederate Army boots, replete with brass rings and leather ankle bindings. In the tropical heat, where everyone wore sandals, the boots now seemed monstrously loud, screaming for attention. I was just about to give him shit for hiding his stash in such an obvious place when I realized my stash was in the side pocket of my gym bag, and that bag was on the roof. I berated myself. I knew to always keep my stash down my pants so that police would need to do a strip search in order to find it, and a strip search is unlikely so long as you stay cool. You? Dale asked. This was not the time to try and hide my stupidity. I looked up to the roof. Dale's gaze intensified. Point taken. We traveled along in silence, thoughts racing ahead trying to predict what was to come. I saw my name added to that list of imprisoned foreigners that are tacked to the bulletin boards of cheap little Bangkok hostels catering to younger travelers. Heading the list was the following. If you have some spare time and some extra food or cigarettes, then please visit the local prison and give them to your fellow countrymen who have been imprisoned on drug charges and who can barter the goods for better living conditions. There followed directions to the prison, and then the list of names organized by country of origin. Australia headed the list since they had the greatest number of names. Made sense. They were relatively close, and the temptation of making quick money must appeal to many. France was next, then Germany and Sweden. Odd, I thought. I tried to imagine Swedish drug runners in Bangkok. Then came America. Canada was way down on the list and had about as many names as Switzerland. In my reverie, I had passed through scenes from Midnight Express and Bridge over the River Kwai, and was in the middle of a scene where Dale and I were in the prison shower, fighting back to back against a mob of sinister ties intent on stealing our rectal virginity. Then the truck came to a halt. We were surrounded by a dozen soldiers wearing jungle fatigues and ominous mirrored aviator sunglasses. Some carried M16 assault rifles, while a couple others carried Uzi submachine guns. 2 soldiers came round to the back of the truck. One spoke politely, but did so with the air of absolute authority. Papers, said Utai, but we already knew what he meant. We had seen the movies. Police, sunglasses, guns, equals papers. We knew that if he spoke again, it would be to get out of the truck. In the movie, it was always bad if you had to get out of the truck. The only thing worse is if they order you to walk into the jungle. We waited. Without the breeze caused by the moving truck, the heat seemed to close in. I looked at Dale and could see he was pale. Sweat was pouring down his forehead. I imagined how I looked, pasty, red-eyed, sweaty, guilty. There was some activity and excited voices coming from the group of soldiers who had taken down all the bags from the roof and who were in the process of examining the contents. There was no mistaking the tone of excitement. They had found something. Well, son, looks like this is it, said Dale without any tremor in his voice. I was impressed. I was sure my voice would have trembled had I spoken. Utai hissed and scowled for an instant before returning his face to a mask of respectful concern. I guess he wanted us to shut up. The 2 soldiers returned to the truck, the leader carrying 1 container of Dale's prescription pills. Dale's lupus required him to take dozens of pills daily. Since the drugs were expensive, he had used his health insurance to stockpile enough medication to last him his entire trip. As a result, Dale was carrying with him a veritable pharmacy. Using Utai as an interpreter, the whole story was told to the soldiers, who surprisingly didn't seem too concerned at all. While Dale and Utai were explaining the pills, I was watching the other soldiers through gaps in the truck's side panels. As each package and bag was opened, its contents would be laid out on the ground in an ever-increasing radius of clothes and groceries. Then I recognized my blue jeans being tossed into the pile. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. They were into my bag. Another murmur of excitement came from the soldiers. They had found something else. From my vantage point, I could see several soldiers carefully backing away from another soldier who was holding gingerly in his hand a metallic object. It was my telescopic baton. They thought it was a hand grenade. It was then that time slowed down. I had experienced this feeling before. It was a reaction to extreme danger. I had felt it before during a fighting match and at another time during a car accident. I knew that whatever I would do, it would be the most correct for the given situation. For others, this would invoke panic and a blanking out of clear perception, but I had come to trust my instinct and let it have free rein over my nervous system. My mind, my personality, merely watched from a distance. I don't believe I actually thought this process out in words exactly, but something told me that this was an opportunity to distract the soldiers from their search. Somehow, I managed to climb over the women and out the back of the truck. This startled the soldiers even more, and gun barrels were raised in my direction. I watched as my body raised its hands over my head and made the requisite submissive gestures by lowering my head and bowing repeatedly. I pointed to the baton and began a pantomime of pushing the trigger that would extend the shaft and then making striking gestures. I understood then that the strategy my instinct was employing was that of the fool. I pantomimed the baton extending, me blocking and parrying imaginary attacks, then counter-striking to the head. "Bang! Ow!" I said, as I rubbed my head and feigned pain from the imaginary strike. I gestured with my hand for the soldier to hand me the baton. He did. I triggered the device, and it exploded instantly into 2.5 feet of bone-crushing steel and chrome. There was a wave of relieved laughter. I rechambered the baton and handed it back to the soldier. He triggered it and waved it around, feeling the weapon's weight and balance. One of the soldiers wanted to examine it, but was unable to rechamber it. He handed it back, and I turned it upside down and drove it into the ground like Thor's hammer to compress the spring and rechamber it. I passed it back. He also tested the trigger, but his interest was already fading. He handed the weapon back to the first soldier, who seemed to be in charge, although no one wore insignia. He was going to hand it to me when I said, "I give you, you keep." "Why do you have this weapon with you?" asked the soldier in almost perfect English. I made a mental note. Never assume that others cannot understand what you're saying. "Well, we heard there were bandits in this area, and it is for self-defense," I replied. He translated this information to the others, which was received with sarcastic-sounding chuckles. Later, when we discovered that almost every hill tribe male over 13 owns a machine gun, I got the joke. "It's okay, you can keep this." He handed back my baton. The show was over. The soldiers began to leave. Whether it was the heat or the fact that anyone who thought an iron stick was a viable means of self-defense in these parts was certainly no drug runner. The soldiers lost interest and left. No one found the bag of marijuana I had in my gym bag. Minutes later, we were back in the truck and on our way. "I bet you think you're a crafty little bastard, don't you?" said Dale.